Jesus has been in the synagogue. Remember from last week. One thing with Mark, you get half his life in about 28 verses in that first chapter. Because if you notice in Mark, it says, immediately they did this, and immediately they did that. And guys like Mark, because it's kind of like watching an action movie. It just never stops. Well, Mark doesn't spend a lot of time with, like teaching, stuff like that. It's just going, heal that, do that, do that. It's just immediate. So in the synagogue, he teaches with authority. Guy gets up and starts yelling, and he casts the demon out. And now they leave, and immediately they go to Andrew and Simon's home. When I was there, somehow when I was there in '94, I got the idea this was. They called it this excavation site with a big church built over the top of it on cantilevers. I mean, so it doesn't touch it. It's like it looks like a spaceship. That this is Simon's mother-in-law's house, and you walk around down there and it's like, I was there. They don't really know, but that's the spot they've identified somewhere way back in the 1st or 2nd century, or the 4th or whenever. And as I was studying this week, I realized that it wasn't the mother-in-law's house. It was Simon's house, and that the mother-in-law was living with them, which means she had no other means of support. So Simon and his wife and his brother are taking care of mom-in-law, of his wife's mother, who, when they get back to the house, is sick with a fever in bed. Now, Jesus, up to this point, has been baptized. This is my son. He's taught with authority. He cast out a demon. And the disciples say, yeah, we can do all that. So they go to Jesus and say, Mom's sick. Do something. He hasn't healed anybody to this point yet. But Mom's sick. Go do something. So he goes in there. He Energia in Greek. He raises her up. The only other times it's used in Mark when it's in reference to Jesus being raised up on the cross. And other times in healings when he raises people up. He raises her up. The fever leaves her. And she goes to serve them. The Greek verb there, diakolia, is only used in reference again to Jesus and his ministry and how he serves others. Now, ladies, this is not a text about a poor, unfortunate woman who was sick in bed and now she has to get up and feed them. Okay? With the verbs that Mark uses, this is a person who first exemplifies the ministry of Christ, being raised up and serving. Oddly enough, in Mark's gospel, the disciples, that verb is never used for them because they never do serve. They never get it in Mark's gospel. At the end of Mark's gospel, the disciples are still dunderheads. Gives us all hope. In the later gospels, Matthew and Luke, they kind of dress them up a little bit. They get, Matthew and Luke at least give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they understood some of what was going on. Not in Mark. Mark there is clueless as everyone else, which I always think is a good thing, because that's who we are as Jesus' disciples. Most of the time we're clueless as to what he's really doing. So, here in Mark's gospel is the first example of what it means to be a disciple. To be raised up by the power of Christ. Serve others. Well, word spreads. Even though this was private. Nobody saw this but the disciples. Maybe just Andrew and but word word gets around in small towns, doesn't it? Doesn't take long. And soon, everybody's bringing anybody who's sick, who's got a problem, who's just gathering down at the end of the street around the door. And Jesus is going around and healing people and curing them and casting out demons. And boy, and there's more people coming, and it gets to be a bit much. In the middle of the night, he sneaks away and goes off to a deserted place, a deserted road, to pray. Oftentimes, we forget that little part. We get so involved in doing this and doing that and being in ministry here and bringing healing to this and being the feet and the hands and the arms, and we get so busy doing, we forget to be human beings. We're just human doings. And we get worn out. And we get burned out. Even Jesus snuck away to pray, to get re-energized, to get some quiet time away from the crowd. How important that is for each of us in our spiritual lives, in our faith walks, in our faith journeys, to take time in private, in quiet with God. I do it in the car a lot. I don't close my eyes when I pray, but I just kind of pretend Jesus is sitting next to me in the seat, and I just talk to him. It's a good way to pray. Sometimes he doesn't like the words I say when I'm driving. And he reminds me of that. As a church, too, we need to do the same thing. We just did statistical reports. In fact, I put a note in the newsletter, and we actually missed a few because we keep finding out about, as we finally got statistical reports done, and the mission and the ministry teams and everything, and then Gail Kelson goes by and said, well, we're taking some prayer shawls off to, prayer shawl ministry. Oh, we forgot that one. Oh, man. We got, that's another one we got to add, and all those people. But just counting folks that are involved in Kids Hope and the soup kitchen and the food pantry. There's another one in there too. I guess in visitation. Well, we counted 107 people in this congregation that are involved in the ministry of the church, that in the mission of the church. That doesn't count Sunday school teachers and liturgists and all that. Some of us do double duty. But our attendance was at 105 in the average, and we got 107 people working. That's pretty darn good. In fact, that's amazing. But when we count the number of folks that are involved in Bible study or prayer groups, ouch. We need to remember that we need that time too. It's great to be doing the things we're doing, and we don't want to stop doing them. But we need to remember that we have to re-energize our batteries too, or that will just become a chore. And then we won't want to do that anymore either. In fact, Diane pointed out to me that back a few years ago, that spiritual formation stuff was real heavy, and that's kind of what created all this impetus to go and do the mission that we're doing. So if we don't continue that part will end too. So this year, we're going to be looking at more ways to involve us in spiritual growth and formation. Because we know that if we don't refuel that fire fire's going to go out. Any of us that have fireplaces know that. If you don't put more wood in the fire, what happens? It goes out. So we're going to focus on that because it's right there in the text. Jesus even had to do that. I don't know why we would ever think we could do all the things that Jesus has us do without at least spending some time in strengthening our own faith. Because Jesus did. Now, granted, there will be people that will pull us away from that. Here's Jesus. I mean, it's right there in the text. Here's Jesus. He's praying, and his disciples come, and they say, "Oh, Lord, this looks really good. We should stop and pray with you." No, they don't say that. They said, "Hey, there's people down there waiting for you." Aren't we like that? You know, "Hey, what are you doing? You're wasting time. Come on, there's people over here. They need you." Boy, and then Jesus really throws a curveball in. This is the toughie. And I look at this text and I don't know where I'm at with it. And you got to deal with it too. All these people are gathered there in Capernaum. He's been healing. Mom-in-law is going, "Oh, Jesus is wonderful. He cured my feet." And they go and they say, "Hey, the crowd." And then Jesus goes, "Let's go over here. Because there's people over here that needs too." Well, yeah, but what about them? Let's go over here. There's people who need us there too. I'm not sure what to do with that sometimes. Other than to know that maybe if the only thing I'm interested in is the fame and the reputation and the glory from doing all these wonderful things, that maybe Jesus goes somewhere else. I don't know. I've struggled with this all week. What does that mean? When Jesus leaves the work, maybe that the work will get done without him. Maybe that if the motivations get wrong, the work falls apart. I think those are questions we ask ourselves. Those are things we struggle with. In how we are faithful disciples. The only faithful disciple in the story is unnamed, Simon's mother-in-law, who is raised up by Jesus and begins to serve. I think that's the model. To be raised up by Jesus and begin to serve.